Do you guys know who? There's a famous streamer named Hassan Piker. Don't cheat. Don't Google it, grok it, or do something like that. I want you to hear his commentary before we get to who he is, because who he is matters. And Alex, my friend, the producers, pulled some extra bonus photos of him in his tax the rich, eat the rich sort of wear. He was talking on a podcast, and he's a live streamer. And he's talking on a podcast about a country he thinks the United States should model.
And as far as like getting closer to what I think has been relatively successful, because if ultimately the point of government is to improve the material conditions of all people to the best of your ability, it's not always going to be perfect, but when you are getting, I don't know, the poorest people, the poorest of the dispossessed masses out of a situation where they were servile to landed gentry, or they were peasants from an agrarian society, or they were dominated by the landlords, but then ultimately they were able to come into modernity and become like a powerhouse, an industrial powerhouse that is competitive with the largest superpower on the planet. I would say if that's the point of good governance, and I think you guys might agree with me on that, I would say China is probably the closest. And there are still plenty of failures within the Chinese system as well, plenty of issues within the Chinese system as well. But that's probably the closest, I would say, to an example that we should follow.
He says, Hassan Piker, that the United States, unfortunately, is only following the most brutal portions of the Chinese regime, but not their good stuff. So his context matters, and his background matters. And so does some comparison between us and the Chinese Communist Party, because in one way, we mimic China a lot, the Chinese Communist Party. For instance, in terms of private property, we mimic China. I know that seems surprising, but we do. And in some other ways, we mimic China. I know that seems surprising, but we do. And his context matters, and I'll share that in just a second. In researching this, I went and looked into bodily autonomy in China in terms of medical decisions. And I was pretty shocked to find out that they actually say they have pretty good bodily autonomy, that you have to be warned about the side effects of medicines, et cetera, that they use. Remember, they didn't use the mRNAs on their population. Now, I don't think you have much bodily autonomy when you can be pulled out of your apartment building, state-owned apartment building, and sent to prison because you were insufficiently servile to the regime emotionally. I mean, that's a pretty important part of bodily autonomy, but at least they warn people about the side effects. In our country, you can go into a surgeon, and the surgeon can look at you and say, back surgery is the way. And they're probably going to say, now, by the way, in about 15% of cases, you're going to end up with follow-up surgeries for a condition like this. In a condition like this, it might be more. And you're probably not likely to get a surgeon saying, well, you could, in fact, try something before you have full knee replacement surgery, say if you're lacking cartilage. This is very, very common in people my age and sometimes people younger if they've done a lot of sports. Renew.healthcare can look at your MRIs now, and they can give you a second opinion, and you can balance this out. You have your doctor, your surgeon, who's part of the insurance company pharma roll-up, and you have completely independent Renew. They can look at your knee, your back, they can look at your shoulder, and they can say there's enough cartilage or there's enough intact tissue, that an injection of the world-class stem cells that come from donor cells, from umbilical cords only, the Wharton's jelly portion only the 20% of the cells they accept because they reject 80%, the exact opposite of the junk in America. An injection of that, time in the hyperbaric chambers, and some IVs, you could avoid surgery altogether and be back doing what you love. Maybe that's just moving around. Go to Renew, RENUE.healthcare. They'll tell you if they can help you or not. Please tell them you're part of the Todd Herman Show family. Renew, RENUE.healthcare. So Hassan Piker is a Nepo baby of sorts. He's the nephew of Cenk Uygur, the Young Turk, and consequently got a hand up in media. Fine. His uncle gave him a hand up. And he's rumored to have a net worth of between $3 and $8 million. And if you look at investments he's in and positions of equity holds, it might go as high as $100 million. He likes to pose with foreign money. He likes to dress fancy, and he likes to have eat the rich t-shirts and things like that. Make the rich pay, anarchy, etc. Now, of course, he's not offering up his money, My friend Alex is producer of the program as well, thinks that he might be really just trying to get on top of the next regime, maybe have a point of being sort of an overseer of the Chinese regime if it's able to take control of the world. So I went and asked some questions. So for instance, I asked Grok, what percentage of Chinese citizens own their own land? In China, private ownership does not exist. All urban land is owned by the state, and rural land is owned by the rural collectives, village groups, or townships. The Chinese Constitution, Article 10, explicitly prohibits private land ownership, a policy rooted in the 1949 revolution and reinforced through the reforms that redistributed land to collectives of the state. So, we're the same. We're already mimic China. Unless you are a foundation or a church, you don't really own land. No individual here owns a home or land. You rent it from the government. The government sees the land and you pay to live on it forever. So we match. I asked Grok about bodily autonomy, and I was pretty stunned to find out that in terms of bodily autonomy, they have actually pretty good rules medically. You have to be warned about the side effects of injections. You cannot be experimented upon against your will. If you choose not to involve yourself in an experiment, you can exit that. Now, that stands for Chinese citizens, not for Uyghurs, because they have injected Uyghurs and done medical experiments on them against their will because they're not Chinese citizens. And this is also according to the Chinese regime. And when you were arrested for speech violations, which has happened a lot in China, for being insufficiently supportive of the regime, you can be put in the Chinese prisons, and a whole lot of things can be done to your bodies, such as this: forced organ donations. This again is from Grok. The most egregious denials occur against bodily autonomy against prisoners of conscience, where state-sanctioned coercion strips all autonomy by independent investigation. And this is independent investigations have figured this out. They've seen on the topic of, let's say, for instance, Falun Gong practitioners, 60,000 to 100,000 ongoing acts of forced organ donations. So they're not then donations. The primary source since 1999, suppression. UN experts in 2021, alarmed by forced exams. In 2025, UN Human Rights Commission testimonies detail some crimes against humanity. Uyghurs and Muslim minorities, 25,000 to 50,000. And this is now lately, this is under Xi, with whom President Trump just had a conversation, and Tibetans and others, thousands. So there's a lot of forced organ, not donations, but takings. Now, we're not quite there yet, but the United States, there is a really nasty, tiny little secret, and that's Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood has been found to sometimes unalive babies, knowing in advance that they've got some money, waiting for some organs. And sometimes it's just for research. There's also this tiny little problem that we're beginning to discover, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has mentioned this, and he runs the National Institute of Health, therefore YouTube censors. He qualifies as an expert. He said, and all too often in many cases, doctors are moving patients along towards being unalived because they want their organs. So it's not quite yet forced. So this guy may well be trying to get out on top of the Chinese regime if it's able to take over. He may well be positioning for that, or he may just be kowtowing to what's cool to gain clicks and engagement. I do know this. China is ahead of us in trying to stomp out the Christian faith, well ahead of us. Oh, and by the way, Chinese home churches are flourishing. I love the fact, and look at it throughout history, every single time human forces attempt to destroy the word of God, they fail. It happened in Iraq. It's happened in the Middle East, where the word of God is flourishing. Home churches in China are flourishing, even as the Chinese Communist Party sets up fake Christian churches. Oh, wow. We do that here. Your tax dollars taken by force, given to USAID, have been distributed to fake Christian churches that call themselves Christian but don't teach anything related to the doctrine. Hey, I wonder if this guy, Hassan Piker, is actually in on something that's happening now. Maybe he wants to take credit for it, saying, hey, I told him to do it, and they did it. Interesting.